So numbers are boring, but if they make you nervous, then they are ignored to the suffering of others. Last night, 13 people were shot in a Chicago park, including a 3-year-old boy hit in the head. This is not rare there. Yet the same people who scream about gun control after a horrible mass shooting are always AWOL in these cases. Both atrocities suck, but one gets a spotlight and the other crickets. There are way more victims of daily gang shootings, but they are forgotten by the media and political classes because it's easier to condemn a phantom rifle than gangs, where you escape uncomfortable truths about besieged communities plagued by thuggery and government cowardice. By ignoring the terrible numbers in Chicago, we've turned communities into animals, and by animals I mean sitting ducks, targets at a fairground that's anything but fair. Is it a statistical coincidence that since the stop-and-frisk law was ruled unconstitutional in New York, shootings rose 13% as gun seizures dropped 17%? Weird. Perhaps the police reduced frisking for fear of legal hassles, which emboldened criminals to pack heat. And who are the victims? Look at communities where stop and frisk was used. It's the minorities who get hurt. So ending stop and frisk, it's a racist dream. Meanwhile, New York has appointed professors to review police behavior, which is like hiring Bob to write a book on etiquette. I doubt they see the numbers, too. Although stats speak louder than words, it's doubtful anyone will listen. If there's no microphone nearby to boost a career, then why bother?
I liked it.
Speaking of microphones, this is a press conference. Gary McCarthy, superintendent of the Chicago Police, had a presser talking about the shooting last night.
Based on ballistics evidence at the scene and information and intelligence from the scene, we believe the weapon used in this incident was an assault-style rifle with a high-capacity magazine. And based on evidence and our initial interviews with witnesses, this appears to be a gang-related shooting. However, that by no means justifies or lessens the seriousness or the nature of this particular event.
So, Eric, this is an interesting statistic. FBI calls Chicago the murder capital of the world. They've had 500 murders compared to New York's 419. But Chicago is New York is 3 times the size.
More popular,
right.
Yeah.
They'd have to have 1,000 more murders.
Murder rate is another way of saying that is the murder rate is more than triple the New York murder rate. 2 things. The police chief there said it's an assault-style weapon they believe, and the gangs have it.
Yeah.
No crap, Chief. That's the problem. Is the gangs have the assault weapons, and they want to take people who want to defend themselves against high-powered weapons out of the hands of innocent Americans. Because the gangs will always have assault weapons.
It's illegal to have one.
Yeah.
They'll always get
something
it.
out there with the monologue. The stop and frisk hasn't gone away. The cops can still stop and frisk. They just have a different standard to adhere to when they make the stops. And also, it's only been like a month. Yeah. So it may be a statistical error. We have to wait and see.
But nevertheless, I think it's significant enough to take note, and I'm not surprised. And if I had to bet my last dollar, I would put it that the numbers are going to continue to rise.
Don't bet your last dollar.
Well, I'm going with it. As a former prosecutor and having participated in all of this, law enforcement investigations, the criminals, the perpetrators, know. They pay attention, and now they're going to take advantage of it while they can until the point where New York will correct itself.
But think about it, Bob. If you ban stop and frisk totally, which you want, then the police is strictly there to wait until after a crime is committed, which is what you see in Chicago and in Detroit.
Well, look, can we put this a little bit in perspective? In Chicago, there is been now a 7-year gang war over drug territory.
Of course.
These things are gang-related, and they are using assault weapons, and they are illegal. I understand that. But the fact of the matter is, it's not like New York where you don't have gangs fighting over drug territory. It's like a war. And I also want to give the Chicago police a lot of credit. They've gone into these areas and done the best they possibly could, but they're up against thousands and thousands of gang members who are fighting it out for drugs that are highly profitable for them. You're getting a very difficult time doing something with that.
Right, but the problem with that is, look, the police have been there. They've tried everything that they can. You've had a couple people come in and talk about why gangs are bad, but the fact is, unless you allow people in these communities to help themselves, they're never going to get out of it. The gang war will never end unless you allow these people to protect themselves and to fight back, and that's never going to happen with the gun control that they have. Here's a statistic for you, speaking of minorities, Greg. African Americans between the ages of 15 to 24-year-olds, the primary cause of death is by gunfire. The majority of those occur in Chicago. It's gang-related, but it also has to do with this idea that speaking of prosecutions, Chicago is dead last when it comes to prosecuting gun crimes. So guess what that does? Guess what that does? When criminals are not prosecuted. No, let me finish. Let me just finish real quickly. When criminals are not prosecuted for gun crimes, guess what? They don't get inputted into the background check system that everyone claims to love. So then they go forward and commit even more crimes if they're using guns that they even purchase legally, which they're not. And so based on all of those things, you have to let the community help themselves, and you have to prosecute gun crimes, or it's never going to change.
Explain to me how you want the people to defend themselves. You're talking about letting them all have guns, right?
If they want one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to be clear on that.
We want law-abiding citizens to have guns, not the gangs.
Outside of D.C., Chicago probably has the most stringent gun control laws in the country. And how's it working out for them?
Because they get, like in D.C., for example, they get them in Virginia and bring them into
Well, because the criminals will always have them. That's the bottom line. You're just preventing law-abiding people from getting it and exercising their Second Amendment rights.
Not only 3 times New York, the murder rate in Chicago is probably 5 times the national rate.
It's New York has pretty strict gun control laws, doesn't it?
Yeah, and they've had low murder rates.
Well, there you go.
How come gun control? But what I don't understand is how come gun control advocates only go after the NRA and not gangs?
It's not a question. I mean, I go after gangs all the time. But
no, you shrug, Bob. You go, oh, it's just gangs.
No,
They're doing the best they can.
What I say, well, they are. What would you do about gangs? What would you do about 1,000 guys, 1,000 people, 1,000 bloods?
I would aggressively prosecute those people, the criminals that have the guns.
You think they're not doing that because
they aren't enforcing the law in the sentences. These guys are getting out.